Tonga.
Tonga, officially the Kingdom of Tonga, is a Polynesian sovereign state and archipelago comprising 176 islands with a surface area of about 750 square kilometres scattered over 700,000 square kilometres of the southern Pacific Ocean, of which 52 are inhabited by its 103,000 people. Tonga stretches over about 800 kilometres, 500 miles, in a north-south line about a third of the distance from New Zealand to Hawaii. It is surrounded by Fiji and Wallis and Futuna, France, to the northwest, Samoa to the northeast, Niue to the east, Kermadec, part of New Zealand, to the southwest, and New Caledonia, France, and Vanuatu to the west. Tonga became known as the Friendly Islands because of the congenial reception accorded to Captain James Cook on his first visit in 1773. He arrived at the time of the Inasi Festival, the yearly donation of the first fruits to the Tuai Tonga, the island's paramount chief, and so received an invitation to the festivities. According to the writer William Mariner, the chiefs wanted to kill Cook during the gathering but could not agree on a plan. Tonga has never lost its sovereignty to a foreign power. In 2010 Tonga took a decisive step towards becoming a fully functioning constitutional monarchy, after legislative reforms paved the way for its first partial representative elections.
Etymology.
In many Polynesian languages, Tongan included, the word Tonga means south, as the archipelago is the southernmost group of islands of central Polynesia. In Tongan, the name is pronounced, and it is commonly pronounced as /tangat/ or /tangtt/ in English. The name of Tonga is cognate to the Hawaiian region of Kona.
History.
An Austronesian-speaking group linked to the archaeological construct known as the Lapita Cultural Complex reached and colonized Tonga around 1500–1000 BCE. Scholars have much debated the exact dates of the initial settlement of Tonga, but recently it has been thought that the first settlers came to the oldest town, Nuku'alofa, about 826 BCE, ±8 years. Not much is known before European contact because of the lack of a writing system, but oral history has survived and been recorded after the arrival of the Europeans. The Tongan people first encountered Europeans in 1616 when the Dutch vessel Endracht made a short visit to trade. By the 12th century Tongans and the Tongan paramount chief, the Tuai Tonga, had a reputation across the central Pacific, from Niue, Samoa, Rotuma, Wallis and Futuna, New Caledonia to Tikopia, leading some historians to speak of a Tuai Tonga Empire. In the 15th century and again in the 17th, civil war erupted. Into the situation the first European explorers arrived, beginning in 1616 with the Dutch explorers Willem Schouten and Jacob Lemaire, who called on the northern island of Niuatapetip, and in 1643 with Abel Tasman, who visited Tongatip and Ha'apai. Later noteworthy European visitors included James Cook, British Navy, in 1773, 1774, and 1777, Alessandro Malaspina, Spanish Navy, in 1793, the first London missionaries in 1797, and the Wesleyan Methodist Reverend Walter Lawrie in 1822. In 1845 the ambitious young warrior, strategist, and orator Tawhafao united Tonga into a kingdom. He held the chiefly title of Tuai Kanokpalub, but had been baptized with the name Siosi, George in 1831. In 1875, with the help of missionary Shirley Waldemar Baker, he declared Tonga a constitutional monarchy. Formally adopted the Western royal style. Emancipated the serfs. Enshrined a code of law, land tenure, and freedom of the press. And limited the power of the chiefs. Tonga became a protected state under a treaty of friendship with Britain on May 18, 1900, when European settlers and rival Tongan chiefs tried to oust the second king. The treaty posted no higher permanent representative on Tonga than a British consul, 1901 to 1970. Although under the protection of Britain, Tonga maintained its sovereignty, and remained the only Pacific nation never to have given up its monarchical government, as did Tahiti and Hawaii. The Tongan monarchy follows an uninterrupted succession of hereditary rulers from one family. The 1918 flu pandemic killed 1,800 Tongans, around 8% of the residents. The Treaty of Friendship and Tonga's protection status ended in 1970 under arrangements established by Queen Salotu III prior to her death in 1965. Tonga joined the Commonwealth of Nations in 1970, atypically as an autochthonous monarchy, with its own local monarch rather than that of the United Kingdom, compare Malaysia, Lesotho, and Swaziland, and became a member of the United Nations in September 1999. While exposed to colonial pressures, Tonga has never lost indigenous governance, which makes it unique in the Pacific and gives Tongans confidence in their monarchical system and much pride. As part of cost-cutting measures across the British Foreign Service, the British government closed the British High Commission in Nuku'alofa in March 2006, transferring representation of British interests to the High Commissioner in Fiji. The last resident British High Commissioner was Paul Nesseling.
Geography.
Administratively, Tonga is subdivided into 5 divisions: Ua, Ha'apai, Niuas, Tongatip, and Vavuyu.
Climate.
Tonga has a tropical climate with only 2 seasons, wet and dry, with most rain falling between February and April. The tropical cyclone season currently runs from November 1 to April 30, though tropical cyclones can form and affect Tonga outside of the season.
Politics.
Tonga is a constitutional monarchy. Reverence for the monarch replaces that held in earlier centuries for the sacred paramount chief, the Tuai Tonga. Criticism of the monarch is held to be contrary to Tongan culture and etiquette. King Tupou VI, a descendant of the first monarch, his family, powerful nobles and a growing non-royal elite caste live in much wealth, with the rest of the country living in relative poverty. The effects of this disparity are mitigated by education, medicine, and land tenure. Tonga provides for its citizens free and mandatory education for all, secondary education with only nominal fees, and foreign-funded scholarships for post-secondary education. The pro-democracy movement in Tonga promotes reforms, including better representation in the parliament for the majority commoners, and better accountability in matters of state. An overthrow of the monarchy is not part of the movement, and the institution of monarchy continues to hold popular support, even while reforms are advocated. Until recently, the governance issue was generally ignored by the leaders of other countries, but major aid donors and neighbours New Zealand and Australia are now expressing concerns about some Tongan government actions. Following the precedents of Queen Salote and the council of numerous international advisers, the government of Tonga under King Tauwhao Tupou IV, reigned 1965 to 2006, monetised the economy, internationalised the medical and education system, and enabled access by commoners to increasing forms of material wealth, houses, cars, and other commodities, education, and overseas travel. Tongans have universal access to a national healthcare system. The Tongan constitution protects land ownership. Land cannot be sold to foreigners, although it may be leased. While there is a land shortage on the urbanized main island of Tongatip, where 70% of the population resides, there is farmland available in the outlying islands. The majority of the population engages in some form of subsistence production of food, with approximately half producing almost all of their basic food needs through farming, sea harvesting, and animal husbandry. Women and men have equal access to education and healthcare and are fairly equal in employment, but women are discriminated against in landholding, electoral politics, and government ministries.
Education.
Tongans enjoy a relatively high level of education, with a 98.9% literacy rate, and higher education up to and including medical and graduate degrees, pursued mostly overseas.
Military.
The Tongan government supported the American coalition of the Willing Action in Iraq and deployed 40-plus soldiers, as part of an American force, in late 2004. The contingent returned home on December 17, 2004. In 2007 a second contingent went to Iraq, and 2 more were sent during 2008 as part of continued support for the coalition. Tongan involvement concluded at the end of 2008 with no reported loss of life. In 2010, Brigadier General Tauaka Utachu, commander of the Tonga Defence Services, signed an agreement in London committing a minimum of 200 troops to cooperate with Britain's International Security Assistance Force, ISAF, in Afghanistan. Tonga has contributed troops and police to the Bougainville conflict in Papua New Guinea and to the Australian-led RAMSI force in the Solomon Islands.
Policies.
The previous king, Taupo Tupou, and his government made some problematic economic decisions and were accused of wasting millions of dollars in poor investments. The problems have mostly been driven by attempts to increase national revenue through a variety of schemes, considering making Tonga a nuclear waste disposal site, an idea floated in the mid-1990s by the current Crown Prince. Selling Tongan protected persons passports, which eventually forced Tonga to naturalize the purchasers, sparking ethnicity-based concerns within Tonga. Registering foreign ships, which proved to be engaged in illegal activities, including shipments for Al-Qaeda. Claiming geo-orbital satellite slots, the revenue from which seems to belong to the Princess Royal, not the state. Holding a long-term charter on an unusable Boeing 757 that was sidelined in Auckland Airport, leading to the collapse of Royal Tongan Airlines. Building an airport hotel and potential casino with an Interpol-accused criminal. And approving a factory for exporting cigarettes to China, against the advice of Tongan medical officials, and decades of health promotion messaging. The king proved vulnerable to speculators with big promises and lost reportedly $26 million to Jesse Bogdanoff, a financial advisor who called himself the king's court jester. The police imprisoned pro-democracy leaders, and the government repeatedly confiscated the newspaper The Tongan Times, printed in New Zealand and sold in Tonga, because the editor had been vocally critical of the king's mistakes. Notably, the Kila, produced specifically to critique the government and printed in Tonga by pro-democracy leader Akalisi Fohiva, was not banned during that time. Fohiva, however, had been subjected to harassment in the form of barratry, frequent lawsuits. In mid-2003 the government passed a radical constitutional amendment to Tonganize the press, by licensing and limiting freedom of the press, so as to protect the image of the monarchy. The amendment was defended by the government and by royalists on the basis of traditional cultural values. Licensure criteria include 80% ownership by Tongans living in the country. As of February 2004, those papers denied licenses under the new act included the Taimi o Tonga, Tongan Times, the Kila, and the Matangi Tonga, while those permitted licenses were uniformly church-based or pro-government. The bill was opposed in the form of a several thousand-strong protest march in the capital, a call by the Tuai Pelihake, a prince, nephew of the king and elected member of parliament, for Australia and other nations to pressure the Tongan government to democratise the electoral system, and a legal writ calling for a judicial investigation of the bill. The latter was supported by some 160 signatures, including 7 of the 9 elected, people's representatives. The then Crown Prince Tupou and Pololevu, the Princess Royal, remained generally silent on the issue. In total, the changes threatened to destabilize the polity, fragment support for the status quo, and place further pressure on the monarchy. In 2005, the government spent several weeks negotiating with striking civil service workers before reaching a settlement. The civil unrest that ensued was not limited to Tonga. Protests outside the King's New Zealand residence made headlines too. A constitutional commission is currently, 2005-06, studying proposals to update the constitution. Prime Minister Prince Ahuichu Onuaki o Tonga Taikuahu, Lavaka Ata Alukalala, now King Tupou VI, resigned suddenly on February 11, 2006, and also gave up his other cabinet portfolios. The elected Minister of Labour, Dr. Felty Saville, replaced him in the interim. On July 5, 2006, a driver in Menlo Park, California caused the deaths of Prince Tuipelihake Uluvalub, his wife, and their driver. Tuipelihake, 55, was the co-chairman of the Constitutional Reform Commission, and a nephew of the king. The public expected some changes when George Tupou V succeeded his father in September 2006. On November 16, 2006, rioting broke out in the capital city of Nuku'alofa when it seemed that the parliament would adjourn for the year without having made any advances in increasing democracy in government. Pro-democracy activists burned and looted shops, offices, and government buildings. As a result, more than 60% of the downtown area was destroyed, and as many as 6 people died. On July 29, 2008, the palace announced that King George Tupou V would relinquish much of his power and would surrender his role in day-to-day governmental affairs to the Prime Minister. The Royal Chamberlain said that this was being done to prepare the monarchy for 2010, when most of the first parliament will be elected, and added, the sovereign of the only Polynesian kingdom is voluntarily surrendering his powers to meet the democratic aspirations of many of his people. The previous week, the government said the king has sold state assets that had contributed to much of the royal family's wealth. On March 15, 2012, King George Tupou V contracted pneumonia and was hospitalized at Queen Mary Hospital in Hong Kong. He was later diagnosed with leukemia. His health deteriorated significantly shortly thereafter, and he died at 3:15 p.m. on March 18, 2012. He was succeeded by his brother Tupou VI.
Economy.
Tonga's economy is characterized by a large non-monetary sector and a heavy dependence on remittances from the half of the country's population who live abroad, chiefly in Australia, New Zealand and the United States. The royal family and the nobles dominate and largely own the monetary sector of the economy, particularly the telecommunications and satellite services. Tonga was named the 6th most corrupt country in the world by Forbes magazine in 2008. Tonga was ranked the 165th safest investment destination in the world in the March 2011 Euromoney Country Risk Rankings. The manufacturing sector consists of handicrafts and a few other very small-scale industries, which contribute only about 3% of GDP. Commercial business activities also are inconspicuous and, to a large extent, are dominated by the same large trading companies found throughout the South Pacific. In September 1974, the country's first commercial trading bank, the Bank of Tonga, opened. There are no patent laws in Tonga. Rural Tongans rely on plantation and subsistence agriculture. Plants grown for both market cash crops and home use include bananas, coconuts, coffee beans, vanilla beans, and root crops such as cassava, taro. The processing of coconuts into copra and desiccated, dried, coconut was once the only significant industry, but deteriorating prices on the world market has brought this once vibrant industry, as everywhere throughout the island nations of the South Pacific, to a complete standstill. In addition, the feudal land ownership system meant that farmers had no incentive to invest in planting long-term tree crops on land they did not own. Pigs and poultry are the major types of livestock. Horses are kept for draft purposes, primarily by farmers working their apiuta, a plot of bushland. More cattle are being raised, and beef imports are declining. The export of squash to Japan once brought relief to a struggling economy, but recently local farmers are increasingly wary of this market due to price fluctuations, not to mention the huge financial risks involved. Tonga's development plans emphasize a growing private sector, upgrading agricultural productivity, revitalizing the squash and vanilla bean industries, developing tourism, and improving communications and transport. Substantial progress has been made, but much work remains to be done. A small but growing construction sector is developing in response to the inflow of aid monies and remittances from Tongans abroad. In recognition of such a crucial contribution, the present government has created a new department within the Prime Minister's office with the sole purpose of catering for the needs of Tongans living abroad. Furthermore, in 2007 the Tongan Parliament amended citizenship laws to allow Tongans to hold dual citizenship. The tourist industry is relatively undeveloped. However, The government recognizes that tourism can play a major role in economic development, and efforts are being made to increase this source of revenue. Cruise ships often stop in Vavayu, which has a reputation for its whale watching, game fishing, surfing, beaches, and is increasingly becoming a major player in the South Pacific tourism market. Tonga's postage stamps, which feature colorful and often unusual designs, including heart-shaped and banana-shaped stamps, are popular with philatelists around the world. In 2005, the country became eligible to become a member of the World Trade Organization. After an initial voluntary delay, Tonga became a full member of the WTO on July 27, 2007. The Tonga Chamber of Commerce and Industry, TCCI, incorporated in 1996, endeavors to represent the interests of its members, private sector businesses, and to promote economic growth in the kingdom. Tonga is home to some 106,000 people, but more than double that number live overseas, mainly in the US, New Zealand and Australia. Remittances from the overseas population has been declining since the onset of the 2008 global economic crisis. The tourism industry is improving, but remains modest at under 90,000 tourists per year.
Energy.
Tonga has begun implementing tailor-made policies to power its remote islands in a sustainable way without turning to expensive grid extensions. A number of islands lack a basic electricity supply, a supply entirely coming from imported diesel. In 2009, 19% of GDP and 25% of imports consisted of diesel. In view of the decreasing reliability of fossil fuel electricity generation, its increasing costs and negative environmental side effects, renewable energy solutions have attracted the government's attention. Together with IRENA, Tonga has charted out a renewable energy-based strategy to power the main and outer islands alike. The strategy focuses on solar home systems that turn individual households into small power plants. In addition, it calls for the involvement of local operators, finance institutions and technicians to provide sustainable business models as well as strategies to ensure the effective operation, management and maintenance once the systems are installed. With the assistance of IRENA, Tonga has developed the 2010 to 2020 Tonga Energy Roadmap, term, which aims for a 50% reduction of diesel importation. This will be accomplished through a range of appropriate renewable technologies, including wind and solar, as well as innovative efficiencies.
Demographics.
Over 70% of the 101,991 inhabitants live on its main island, Tongatip. Although an increasing number of Tongans have moved into the only urban and commercial centre, Nuku'alofa, where European and indigenous cultural and living patterns have blended, village life and kinship ties remain influential throughout the country. Despite emigration, Tonga grew in population from about 32,000 in the 1930s to more than 90,000 by 1976. According to the government portal, Tongans, Polynesian by ethnicity with a very small mixture of Melanesian, represent more than 98% of the inhabitants. 1.5% are mixed Tongans and the rest are European, the majority are British, mixed European, and other Pacific Islanders. According to a New Zealand paper in 2001 there were approximately 3,000 or 4,000 Chinese in Tonga, thus comprising 3 or 4% of the total Tongan population. In 2006, Nuku'alofa riots mainly targeted Chinese-owned businesses, leading to the immigration of several hundred Chinese. So that only about 300 remain. Primary education between ages 6 and 14 is compulsory and free in state schools. Mission schools provide about 8% of the primary and 90% of the secondary level of education. State schools make up for the rest. Higher education includes teacher training, nursing and medical training, a small private university, a women's business college, and a number of private agricultural schools. Most higher education is pursued overseas. 90% of the population are considered overweight using NIH Interpretation of Body Mass Index, BMI, data, with more than 60% of those obese. 70% of Tongan women aged 15 to 85 are obese. Tonga and nearby Nauru have the world's highest overweight and obese populations.
Languages.
The Tongan language is the official language, along with English. Tongan, a Polynesian language, is closely related to Wolsian, Uveen, Niuean, Hawaiian, and Samoan.
Religion.
Everyday life is heavily influenced by Polynesian traditions and especially by the Christian faith. For example, all commerce and entertainment activities cease from midnight on Saturday until midnight on Sunday, and the Constitution declares the Sabbath sacred forever. As of 2006, somewhat more than a third of Tongans adhered to the Methodist tradition, with Catholic and Mormon populations equaling another third of the adherents. A minority of worshippers form the Free Church of Tonga. The official figures from the latest government census of 2011 show that 90% of the population are affiliated with a Christian church or sect, with the four major church affiliations in the kingdom as follows: Free Wesleyans Methodists, 36,592 or 36%, The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, LDS Church, 18,554 or 18%, Roman Catholics, 15,441 or 15%, Free Church of Tonga, 11,863 or 12%, Baha'i Faith, 5%.
Culture and diaspora.
Humans have lived in Tonga for nearly 3,000 years, since settlement in late Lapita times. Before the arrival of European explorers in the late 17th and early 18th centuries, Tongans had frequent contacts with their nearest oceanic neighbors, Fiji and Niue. In the 19th century, with the arrival of Western traders and missionaries, Tongan culture changed, especially in religion, such that as of 2013 almost 98% of residents profess Christianity. The people discarded some old beliefs and habits and adopted others. Contemporary Tongans often have strong ties to overseas lands. Many Tongans have emigrated to Australia, New Zealand, or the United States to seek employment and a higher standard of living. The Tongan diaspora retains close ties to relatives at home, and a significant portion of Tonga's income derives from remittances to family members, often aged, who prefer to remain in Tonga.
Sport.
Rugby union is the national sport, and the national team, Ikaeltei, or Sea Eagles, has performed quite well on the international stage. Tonga has competed in 5 Rugby World Cups since 1987. The 2007 Rugby World Cup was its most successful to date, winning both of its first 2 matches, against the USA 25-15, and Samoa 19-15. And came very close to upsetting the eventual winners of the 2007 tournament, the South African Springboks, losing 30-25. A loss to England, 36-20 in their last pool game ended their hopes of making the knockout stages. Nevertheless, by picking up 3rd place in their pool games behind South Africa and England, Tonga earned automatic qualification for the 2011 Rugby World Cup in New Zealand. At this competition, they beat France, the 5th-ranked national team and eventual finalist. Tonga's best result prior to 2007 came in 1995, when they beat Ivory Coast 29-11, and 1999 when they beat Italy 28-25, although with only 14 men they lost heavily to England, 101-10. Tonga performed the Ikaeltei war dance before their matches. Tonga used to compete in the Pacific Tri-Nations against Samoa and Fiji, now replaced by the IRB Pacific Six Nations involving Japan, the second-string Junior All Blacks in Australia, although from 2008 the Junior All Blacks would be replaced by the Maori All Blacks. At club level, there are the Date Cup Provincial Championship and the Pacific Rugby Cup. Rugby union is governed by the Tonga Rugby Football Union, which is also a member of the Pacific Islands Rugby Alliance. Tonga contributes to the Pacific Islanders Rugby Union team. Jonah Lomu, Viliami, William, O'Fungor and George Smith, Wycliffe Palub, Doug Howlett, Tate Fupolo now are all of Tongan descent. British and Irish Lions and Welsh international player Taulup Failtau is Tongan-born and the son of Tongan international Kulau Failtau. Rugby is popular in the nation's schools, and students from schools such as Tonga College, Tupou College are regularly offered scholarships from New Zealand, Australia and Japan. Rugby League has gained some success. In the 2008 Rugby League World Cup, Tonga recorded wins against Ireland and Scotland. In addition to the success of the national team, many players of Tongan descent make it big in the Australian National Rugby League competition. These include Willie Mason, Manuva Tuvai, Brent Kite, Willie Tonga, Anthony Tupou, Antonio Carfuzzi, Israel Folau, Taniela Tuiaki, Michael Jennings, Tony Williams, Felty Mateo, Vetulai Talanoa, to name but a few. Subsequently, some Tongan Rugby League players have established successful careers in the British Super League, such as Antonio Carfuzzi. Tongan boxer Paia Wolfgram won the silver medal in the super heavyweight division, greater than 91 kilograms, at the 1996 Atlanta Summer Olympics. Thus far, he remains the only athlete to have won an Olympic medal from the island nations of the South Pacific outside Australia and New Zealand. Tongan swimmer Amanai Fonua won back-to-back gold medals at the Oceania Championships in the men's 50m breaststroke, and also competed in the 2011 FINA World Aquatics Championships in Shanghai, China. Luger, Bruno Banani was the first athlete to represent Tonga in the Winter Olympics. He finished 32nd in the men's luge competition at Sochi 2014.
Fauna and flora named after Tonga.
Many species of animals or plants have been named after Tonga. Their species name in Latin is usually Tonganus or Tonganensis. An example is Naso tonganus, a fish of the family Acantharidae from the Pacific Ocean, named after Tonga by Achille Villeniens in 1835.
Media. Regional distribution.
Tamio Tonga, Tonga, New Zealand, Australia, United States of America.
Domestic distribution.
Kiala, newspaper, Talaki, newspaper, Kalonakali, newspaper, Tauatena, newspaper, Kakalu, newspaper, Tonga Broadcasting Commission, Television Tonga, Television Tonga 2, Radio Tonga 1, Radio Tonga 2, Cool 90 fathoms, 103 fathoms.